What is the actual value of a human life? Why are we here? As you said, we are here to experience primarily what it is like to be separated from the consciousness that combines us, and to learn from that what love feels like and what joy feels like.
Dr. Martha Beck is a Harvard-trained sociologist, best-selling author, and has coached renowned leaders across the world like Oprah. In this conversation, Martha shares her extraordinary consciousness journey and why she's convinced humanity is on the brink of a massive shift.
And I think there's going to be a transformation of consciousness in my lifetime. I see it both as a catastrophe for millions and millions, a crisis for millions and millions, and also a way that the ground is being plowed for a new consciousness to grow up like grass everywhere.
From academic inquiry to mystical visions, Martha bridges the analytical and the magical, revealing what suffering is really trying to show us.
Wherever there is psychological suffering, I believe the reason for psychological suffering is to alert us that there is a mistaken belief in our belief system. Suffering is our greatest ally and our teacher and our way home.
Perhaps this shift in consciousness will be here sooner than we think.
Based on what we see sociologically, the interesting thing is that what's happening now has happened before in various societies, but it's happening so much more rapidly and at a larger scale now. And I would give it about 2 years until there are enough people who have chosen to walk away from the culture into their own truth for much of the fuel to go out of the old culture and a new way of being to begin. One of the things that happens when you're awake, you know for an absolute certainty you are not separate from anything and that everything is conscious.
Before we get into this conversation, I want to ask you to join this amazing community of consciousness explorers. This whole idea of pursuing expanded consciousness and the boundaries of human potential while living a modern life is relatively new, which is why we interview revered masters, teachers, experts, and practitioners to help you on your own journey. To stay up to date on the latest conversations, simply click subscribe below and you'll be notified each time a new episode comes out. I am so grateful for all of your support and comments. I love reading them. Now let's dive into this conversation.
Hey, Martha, it's great to see you.
Oh, it's so good to be here, Scott.
You know, I thought I would kick this off with a quote that I heard you say in another podcast I was listening to that I found just really interesting and also resonant with me. So the quote is, "We evolved to live in harmony, creativity, and joy, but culture broke that contract." When did that insight start to come alive for you?
Oh, well, I think it was when my whole life. I was born into this very, very fervently religious community and just thought that was the way the world worked. And then at 17, I headed off to Harvard, which was not an intensely religious community. And I had that jarring experience of two worldviews clashing against each other. They say a person with one watch always knows what time it is. A person with two watches is never sure. That's not as true now that we do computers. But the idea is that when you've been part of two cultures that collide with each other that don't agree, it's sort of, you don't know what is true of either of them. So I kind of became a really sort of relativistic thinker, but I knew for sure that the culture that raised me and the culture I was living in could not coexist. And that was what sort of squirted me out of culture and made me start looking at it as a thing that wasn't me.
And I think a lot of people here are kind of like trying to discover their authenticity, trying to return to that essence, that true self, the thing that we all want to know, which is, why did we come here? What the heck are we doing here? And what are we tending to do? And I mean, how did that journey unfold for you? What were some of the things that started to help you move beyond some of the cultural programming?
Well, the thing that really, really sent me into the stratosphere was I got my BA, then I went on for an MA and a doctorate at Harvard, married another guy from Utah, another person from Utah, and we had 2 kids. We had 3 children while I was in the program, but the second one was prenatally diagnosed with Down syndrome, my son, Adam. And I was 25 years old because Mormons breed young. And I'm a PhD candidate at Harvard, and I'm pregnant. And from the beginning of the pregnancy, y'all, I am not crazy. While I was going to my Harvard classes, I started having psychic experiences. I mean, I suppose I would call them spiritual now, but I would think of someone, particularly my then husband, and would immediately see whatever he was seeing. Now, he was traveling between Boston and Singapore at the time. So he was seeing a wide variety of things. And whatever he was looking at would pop into my consciousness incredibly vividly. And then I could check it with him afterward. So I thought something really weird's going on here. Then I got caught in a fire in our high rise. We lived on the 10th floor. And when you're in a fire in a high rise, you go down the stairs. You don't take the elevator. The elevator tells you that. Unfortunately, what was on fire was a grocery store in the basement, and it was using the staircases as chimneys, basically. There was no oxygen in those stairwells. It was pitch black. I mean, pitch black. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And it was full of screaming, running people trying to get outside. It was quite something. I'm carrying my 18-month-old daughter. I'm pregnant and I cannot breathe. And I'm going down floor after floor in the darkness, lose count. Don't want to go on about the story too much, but the short of it is I blacked out or lost consciousness from lack of oxygen, smacked my head against a wall. I had my daughter. The last thing I remember was trying to push her forward so that she would get kicked and someone would find her and take her out of the building. And then I felt these two strong hands jerk me, come around my back, pull me to my feet, and I got like frog marched down 2 more flights of stairs and pushed out into this brilliant, cold Boston snowy day, hacking and coughing. My whole face was completely covered with soot, and did not see the guy who rescued me. Figured he was a firefighter. Went to a friend's house because the building was condemned for that night. And the news had video. It was a huge story. And it showed me coming out of the building with my daughter. And there's no one behind me. And I'm like,
whoa,
what? We had one of those, an early TiVo machine. And I kept saying, play it again, play it again, play it again. And I'm like, I wasn't alone. I was not alone. So that freaked me out. Then the psychic stuff freaked me out. And then the baby I was carrying was prenatally diagnosed with Down syndrome. And I had a very short time to make a decision whether to terminate. And they told me, the doctors at Harvard said it would be like leaving a malignant tumor if they weren't allowed to take it out. And I was, it broke my heart. You don't want to hear that diagnosis. I'm not a righteous person who just feels fine with that. I did not feel fine with it. But at the same time, I thought something's going on here. And these people around me who put so much value in their intellect, I don't think they're particularly happy. But I have heard that people with Down syndrome can be happy. Why do they not get to exist? And we get to exist because we live in this intellectual meritocracy. We look a certain way, we earn money. What is the actual value of a human life? Why are we here, as you said? And after pondering, what came to me was, we are here to experience primarily what it is like to be separated from the consciousness that combines us, to be separated, to be frightened, to be alone, and to learn from that what love feels like and what joy feels like. And the experience of joy, Emerson said, beauty is its own excuse for being. To me, joy is beauty felt. It is its own excuse for being. So I said, no, I'm going to have the baby. And I did. And they said, you're throwing your life away. And I was, but it was a terrible, horrible life. And I'm so glad I got rid of it. Yeah. And that kid who was supposed to break me became the subject of my first New York Times bestseller. So ka-ching!
Nice. I mean, I imagine that was also, the ultimate spiritual teacher.
Yeah. He still is. He is playing on a different frequency. When he was actually born, two things happened. I felt the energy that came with him leave my body, and I was so bereft. There was a bit of it left, though. I could hang on to a bit of it. And the second thing that happened was that he peed into the face of the doctor that called him a malignant tumor. And to me, it was like right there, he had achieved everything I needed to be proud of him for the rest of his life. Yeah, he's magnificent.
Wow, that's amazing. And I also recall there's this story of you having a near-death experience.
Yeah.
Where you were told that joy is how we're supposed to feel all the time.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So after he was born, I went a little off the deep end. I made a decision during the pregnancy. I had always gone by not as a Mormon, I didn't, but at Harvard, I went by the scientific principle that nothing should be accepted or believed until it's proven true. Well, I didn't know what was true. I had lived in multiple cultures. Now I'd had this weird psychic experience. I did not know what was true. And so I decided that, and I thought we never can because it's always subjective. So I thought, how about this? I will allow anything to be possible until I'm completely convinced it's not true. And that meant, it may sound like a slight shift, but it meant I was open to everything. So I was a seeker at that point. I practiced every religion I could read up on. I read every holy work. I read all the Western philosophers. I read Asian philosophers. I studied shamanism. Anything that could show me this other dimension to the world that our sort of Western materialist culture denies, I was after it. I wanted to know. And I was in that state when I was watching some students. I was teaching as an assistant professor, and they were having a discussion, and they started talking about rape. And I felt this very intense, strange sensation. And I bolted out of my chair. I ran out into the hall and passed out. And when I came to, I was in a lot of internal pain and was rushed to a hospital where they did emergency surgery on me. They thought I might be riddled with cancer. What they actually found was that I was kind of riddled with scar tissue, which was from sexual abuse that I'd experienced when I was 5 to 7 years old. But I didn't, I hadn't been I had been suppressing it very vigorously my entire life. But in that surgery, I was completely anesthetized. And then I opened my eyes, I looked around, I sat up, I watched the surgery for a minute, and then I thought, wait. I'm basically tied down with my eyes taped shut. What is going on? And I lay back down into my body, and I looked up, and there was this there were the surgical lights, and I was like, what's happening? And right in the middle between all the lights appeared this ball of light, same thing. It was about the size of a golf ball when I first saw it. And then it started to grow, and it grew in intensity and in size, and it just filled everything it touched. And when it touched my body, I experienced the most overwhelming, exquisite bliss, joy, love, homecoming, laughter. Every good thing you could feel was there. And it was such a huge relief. And I started to cry. And then I just looked back up at the light, and it completely suffused me. And it communicated a lot without words. And one of the things was, I've always been here and I will always be here. Another was, you are starting to understand through this experience what you actually are. And another thing was, this is how you're meant to feel, and not after you die, but in your body. This is the reason you're here, to be in that body and to feel like this all the time. So I came out of the surgery and immediately said, bring the anesthesiologist, please. Because I was trained to be very skeptical. And first of all, I was sobbing, and they were all trying to comfort me, the nurses. And I was like, I'm happy. Is it normal for people to cry after surgery because they're happy? They were like, not really. And actually, the first person I saw when I woke up was a janitor who was mopping the floor. And I looked at him and I said, I love you so much. Because I did. I loved everybody and everything, just wild with love. And the anesthesiologist came in. I grilled him. What did you give me? What is the reaction? What do people ever have hallucinations? And he finally said, just tell me what happened. Because when you started to cry, the surgeons thought that I could feel the operation. And so they got very worried and said to the anesthesiologist, increase the meds. And he said, I was going to do it. And a voice said to me, don't do that. She's crying because she's happy. And he said, I just did what it told me.
Wow.
And then he was like shaking because he didn't know if it was true. He said, did I do the right thing? And I said, well, here's what happened to me. And I told him just a tiny bit of it. And he said, well, I've been practicing for 33 years. And you know how many times this has happened? I said, no. And he said, once. And he kissed me on the forehead and walked away. And I have loved him ever since, along with the janitor, the nurses, and everyone else in the hospital. So yeah, I came out of that and thought, I will not tolerate any circumstance, any belief, any relationship that doesn't feel like that light. That's what I'm meant to do. Totally trashed my life. Again, left Mormonism. That meant leaving my family of origin, especially with the sexual abuse stuff. Really haven't talked to my family since 30 years ago. Yeah, all the friends that I'd made were Mormon growing up. So to them, I was also like evil. Yeah, it wasn't just that I lost everyone, is that I lost everyone and they thought I was evil. And I knew that. And as a people pleaser,
evil
that ain't
joy
easy.
seeker. What a funny thing to consider evil, huh?
Yeah. I'm sorry for the length of these stories. I'm trying to, be more concise, but I feel like people need to see the whole scenario to understand like how deeply having one of those experiences that is so incredibly life-giving is also deeply disruptive. And I think whatever is over there trying to gently wake us up is always being kind. It's always saying, how much awakening can you handle? Because it's going to come with a certain amount of disruption. So let's give this to you in as strong a medicine as we can without totally flooding you. So yeah, I think it's there for everyone.
I think you're right. And I think I've too observed that there's a intelligence to the pacing of things.
Yeah.
And I think there's actually immense freedom in recognizing that. Because you realize whether it's what you're facing internally in a contemplative practice or something that life is giving you, it's been kind of perfectly designed and choreographed for your evolution. And when you can trust that, man, that's a big unlock.
Yeah. I mean, you sound like a man who's been through it. And I know like I'm here to be interviewed, but it's fun to talk to another. I'm still a seeker, even though I feel like the only place I need to look is inside myself. I've learned that much. But you felt that too, yeah? You've had the same.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people, they listen to the spiritual teachings and the people talking about consciousness and the joy and the love, and they're like, wow, that sounds great. I want some of that. And it's like, well, there's a flip side of the coin of often requisite suffering required. Maybe required is not the right word, but at least in my own experience, where, man, that old paradigm has to break down.
Yeah.
And I found that, and I'd be curious to get your perspective, where like it had to be really strong in one direction so that I could kind of come out on the other side and then serve in a particular way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's kind of like, maybe your message and teaching wouldn't be as powerful if you didn't have this intense Mormon upbringing, this Harvard background, all of these type of things. And for me, that was like hard charging type A entrepreneur, went to Princeton, athlete, all the things.
Yeah.
And, dismantling that is and continues to be a lot. But I wouldn't trade it for a second. That's the funny part about it.
Do you think it takes some kind of crisis? I mean, I always think there are three factors. There's shock, which is like, I get this diagnosis from my son. It upends my idea of what a human life is for. Then there's opportunity, where maybe you are just graced with some, like they say Krishnamurti was, you just suddenly awaken for no particular reason. And then there's just growth as you go through the world and you get a lot of hard knocks. It builds to the point where you can no longer tolerate it. But I always think it kind of has to come to a breaking point, because the mind that you have now is actually not capable of experiencing the next iteration of your consciousness. It has to break. It has to break open. And this is the Asian model, of course, of like each iteration of your egoic self has to shatter. And each of those feels like a death, which is terrifying and sometimes painful. But I think once you've been around that cycle a few times, you suddenly go, okay, I smell a rat here. I smell God, as Carolyn Mace once said. Like, did it take you crises to break open?
Oh, yeah. One of the things that was really 100%, and I've noticed this amongst peers, where people where everything is going incredibly well in life are usually not on this path.
Right.
Like I've just noticed that, because there's no reason, right? If what you're doing is working and you're in a culture, right, that is not only that is celebrating that is telling you you're doing awesome. Like, why would you change?
Yeah.
There's too much inertia. But one of the things, and I know you're into muscle testing. Have you experienced David Hawkins' work?
Yes.
The Massive Consciousness.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really liked about something that he wrote was that, to kind of get to the next paradigm shift, it often requires you to like let go or deconstruct whatever was the thing that you just gained. Right. And so it's like when you have that, your ego has that, wow, I can do anything, willpower, confidence, boom, to get to the next level, that has to be shattered.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, now I'm in this like surrender place and all is slow. And then it's just like that thing, that mountaintop just keeps getting shattered. And
yes.
And to me, it's an intelligent design. There's no other way that it could possibly work, because you would just stay stuck at that plane that you're on.
Right. Yeah. And do you feel like, what you said a little while ago, what are we doing this for? Like at this stage in your journey, I mean, I have my own answer, but where are you right now in terms of your interpretation of that ultimate meaning? Why are we here?
Well, I think everything we do is for the continuous evolution of all. That's on a personal and an individual level. And I think my interpretation is that for a lot of us, it seems that there's a combination of learning and contribution. And so I think some people, maybe this particular incarnation is just about learning the lessons. I think there's people that come back and say, hey, I'm here. I want to be here at this time of this global shift to support it. And in order to support it, I'm going to have to experience these things that I can then weave into that contribution. And so, and all of this is in service of the whole collective evolution.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I net out. And I do think karma is real and plays a big role in this. Like Krishnamurti, like that dude's probably done some work. He's probably done some serious tours of duty before he got here to magically wake up. And it's also something he probably chose, or had some, just kind of like, I don't know if it's true, but I like the idea that we have somewhat of a role in designing what our lifetime will be like, and that as
Mm-hmm.
you advance, you have kind of a little bit more say of that.
Mm.
So yeah, that's kind of where I net out. And you know, who knows? One thing I have learned is that the more I know, the less I know. And so
Ain't that the truth?
I'm open to that opinion being completely changed in the near future.
I hope you're enjoying this conversation so far. If you like what you hear, let me know by clicking like, subscribing to the channel, and responding with a comment around something that you found interesting in the conversation so far. In addition to these videos, I do a lot of writing on the exploration of consciousness and my own personal revelations in my newsletter called Consciousness: The Doorway to Human Evolution. To receive these updates and more, all you need to do is simply head to the link in the description below and you'll be added to the community of 20,000 plus consciousness explorers receiving weekly ideas and inspiration in their inbox. I look forward to hearing from you there. Now let's get back to the show.
I would put that as a rubber stamp on everything I ever say. I anticipate my mind to be completely changed in the near future. So what do you think of this time in history? Because it's been interesting for me to watch. I've been obsessed with the transformation of human consciousness. Actually, it started when I was a child, and then I kind of pushed it away because it wasn't really Mormon. It was something else. But it came back with an absolute avalanche after that white light experience. And I started writing books and sort of sneaking in. And I think there's going to be a transformation of consciousness in my lifetime. And it's been a while, man. Like I've been waiting decades for this. But my PhD is in sociology and my MA. And what I see is the sociological inevitability of the breakdown of a system, global system, in the material world. And I see it both as a catastrophe for millions and millions, a crisis for millions and millions, and also a way that the ground is being plowed for a new consciousness to grow up like grass everywhere. What's your view?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything that you went through with your deconstruction in order to birth something new is what's happening on a global scale. And I think what feels really alive for me is like, I think we're about to we are starting and going to go much deeper into a rapid meaning crisis because so many people have derived, at least in Western culture, is really the only one that I could probably speak for because I've lived in it. But so many people, myself included, have derived all of their meaning around their profession.
Yeah.
Look what I can do. It's their primary strategy for self-worth. And, we're just on the brink of so many jobs, right? We're just not as good as the AI. And I'm seeing it firsthand with stuff that I'm doing. And it's like, wow, is that going to be just a massive spark for people to look inward and say, well, if I'm not my job, then what am I? And and what actually makes me happy?
Yeah.
And what am I here to do? And what is a human contribution in a world of machines doing everything? And so for me, it's all part of the grand design unfolding. And I also think, there's just a lot of information. I think the wool is being pulled off people's eyes.
Yeah.
With like a lot of the things that were quote unquote conspiracies, right? And just like the media bias, it's like, hey, a lot of this stuff looks like it's true, And so there's all these radical shocks to the system that are just like little pinpoints and awakening for people. And I think it's just going to continue to accelerate. And I think the role of people that have had to go through that transformation earlier than this and from their own experience are really there to help shepherd and to help support. as a larger percentage of people go through that, both energetically and practically. So, that's kind of what I think's going on. And I'm like you, where I'm like, oh, the shiftist consciousness is coming. And then I go to my hometown and I have some conversations. I'm like, maybe I'm in my own bubble here. So
I love meeting people like you. I love meeting people like you. And here's the weird thing, Scott. I've met them my whole life, here, there, and everywhere. I remember I wrote a book after I went to South Africa one time. You and I both have a friend there, Boyd Vardy, and he'd been teaching me to trek, and we'd been doing seminars together. And I had a dream that I was going to be visited by my ancestors. And in the dream, I got very worried because I was afraid all these angry Mormons were about to come into this hut where I was dreaming. And then I thought, no, this is the African ancestors. This is way back. And then I got all tense because I thought they were going to make me sacrifice a goat. I'm like, I'm not killing a goat. I will not kill a goat. Okay. And then there was this and this sweet, soft feeling came in, no visuals. And I thought, oh, these are my ancestors. Well, these aren't so bad. And they were like, I thought, okay, now I've got to be ready for my message from my ancestors. And the ancestors said, Martha, relax. And then they went away. And I thought this was hilarious. So the next night, we're all around the fire on a cold South African night. And I thought this would make good party conversation for a couple of my friends from the Shangaan tribe, which is the local tribe there. So I told them this, and they looked at me in abject horror and ran away. And I was like, oh my God, what did I do? What kind of faux pas did I just commit? Well, it turns out that if you have a dream that the ancestors are coming, you have to see a shaman like right away. It's like, I can't breathe. You need a doctor. I had a dream of my ancestors. You need a shaman. So it took them like an hour to come back with this little woman who spoke no English. She was from Mozambique, this tiny old woman. And she sat down on this mat and she did this divination system called throwing the bones. And she's throwing the bones and she said, this is for a woman. She's from far away. And it was me. And it was so interesting, Scott, because when she looked at me and I met her eyes, I felt as if there were icy little darts going all the way up and down my body. I've never felt anything like it. But it wasn't fun and it wasn't cute and it wasn't sweet. It was like, oh, shit, there's something real happening here. It was very intense. Anyway, she told me a lot of things. You have 3 children. You'll never have any more. Yay. But then she said, you have a job, and part of your job is that you have to tell the people of your culture the things that that people like me remember. Your culture has thrown away the essence of spirit, and you have to help them get it back. You have to. So I came back from that and spent a few years really researching that and going all over the place. And during that time, everywhere I went, it would be a chauffeur on a book tour. It would be someone I met in an elevator. It was someone who came up to me at a restaurant or whatever. And they'd be like, okay, we're here for the shifting in consciousness, right? Right. And I'd be like, who are you? And it was so weird, Scott. It was like, I came to believe very deeply in magic. And then I started talking too much about magic. And people started using it in a very new age, I want a new Ferrari kind of way. That's why later I wrote a book on integrity, because here's what I think now. If you strive for absolute integrity in every action you take, even in your thoughts, you will have clarity and calm. You'll begin to experience another consciousness, and all these miracles will happen all around you, but you won't really care. Because that's not what it's about. It's just a side effect.
Do you think that there's an intelligence behind reality that's trying to move you into integrity at all times?
I think there is an intelligence within and through all of materiality. I mean, we've known for over 100 years now that matter is just an energy cloud that's been observed by consciousness. Nobody in physics knows what the hell consciousness actually is, but we know that it fundamentally shifts wave actions to particle actions, and that we have it, because here we are. So I think consciousness is actually prior to matter. I think consciousness is the fabric of the universe itself, and it creates matter in part of itself to enjoy different experiences. So yeah, it is absolutely loving, intentional, but its goals are not the goals that we are socialized to believe in. They are, I think, our goals at heart or in the marrow of our bones, in our souls, but they differ from what we're told by our cultures. And we all, no matter where we come from, even if it's the culture of a couple, it might keep you away from integrity between all your ways of knowing. And your job is to find the place you're out of integrity and align so that you can continue to be like a larger and larger conduit of this, as I said, wildly loving, fantastically intelligent consciousness that ultimately we all are.
I have a number of follow-ups to that. So the first would be, do you have any practical tips for people kind of just observing their integrity and realigning when they're out of it?
Yeah. I don't mean that to be judgmental, by the way. It's like the structural integrity of an airplane. If the pieces are in order, it flies. If they're completely out of alignment with each other, it doesn't fly. And so if your life is not working, you look at the spot where it's not working, like your relationship isn't working, you don't love your job, your health isn't great, whatever it is. Wherever you find psychological suffering, there you will find a misalignment of your beliefs in the mind compared to your beliefs with the deepest level of knowing. And the suffering, the psychological suffering, which is not the same as pain. We all have pain. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional, right? So pain is what you get when someone steps on your foot. Suffering is what you get when you start to hate that person for stepping on your foot and thinking of reasons why you have to get back and whatever. So yeah, wherever there is psychological suffering, I believe the reason for psychological suffering is to alert us that there is a mistaken belief in our belief system, and it helps us target it. We go where it hurts. And there you will find something that you believe deeply, but it will still hurt. And your job then is to use the brilliant human mind you've got to pierce the illusion that belief represents. And it's an interesting exercise in the ego dismantling itself, but it's there as an ally. Suffering is our greatest ally and our teacher and our way home.
I totally agree. My main spiritual practice for probably the past 5 years has been noticing every time I'm disturbed and then going into that, and understanding what pattern of the consciousness is creating that. And it's just incredible, right? And it just turns the whole life into this big game of seeing yourself clearly. And it's so fun. And, that's what I'm passionate about is like, this view of spirituality, right? That's integrated into life. That's not just like, go hang out for a retreat for a month and then go back and just run around and do the same shit. Like, man, life's just teeing you up with opportunities every day, multiple times a day. And it's just, do you want to use them?
Oh, it's so exciting. The first Easter that I had a dog, I had 3 little kids and a dog. And my then husband and I, we hid eggs all over. It was a beagle. They can eat until they blow up. So we didn't really take into account that we had a dog until 4:00 when we hear, bark, bark, and we go out and there's our dog, almost completely round, surrounded by eggshells. Like he has found eggs everywhere. And he's just shouting, "Pack! There is food everywhere!" And he was in such joy. That's how I feel about the process of spiritual awakening. There are eggs everywhere. There's food everywhere. Everywhere there's suffering. Everywhere there's uncertainty. Everywhere there's confusion. Like pull up belly up to the table and bring your appetite, because you're about to experience something delicious when you flip the cause of suffering and it brings you into a new level of awakeness. Boom, boom, boom. Every source of suffering reverses into its opposite.
And I would say that discovery process becomes the most enriching part of your life, right? Like,
oh, why would you do anything else? Seriously,
it's just
why?
the best. It's just the best.
Yeah.
One question, the other question that came up for me about consciousness being primary to matter is, I think a lot of people hear that and they're like, okay, cool. I'm going to manifest a Lamborghini, right? Like that's the place that our cultural conditioning points the application of that insight.
Yeah.
And how do you think that we apply that information if we believe it?
We bring it through the lens of culture. And then there is a certain amount of truth in whatever you hold with great authenticity and purity. You're going to see it. You're going to see it through selective attention, but it also, undeniably for me, it starts to happen. Things that you're deeply interested in, or you're thinking and perseverating, we call it in psychology, you're thinking about all the time, they tend to start showing up. Like when I read the book, The Secret, I did not like it. It said things like, don't look at sick people. That's how you get sick. And I was like, no. I read it on a plane. And I got off the plane, and on my cell phone, I get a call, and it's a friend. And she said, I've been reading The Secret, and I just got to the part about you. And I was like, there's no part about me in The Secret. She says, yes, there is, right here. I had been obsessing about The Secret, fussing about it in the air. She had found another book called The Secret, written and self-published by a rabbi somewhere, that talked about me and called me at that moment to tell me she was talking about that The Secret was rocking her socks. And I was like, wait, what? That's a bit of a coincidence.
Wow.
I mean, the coincidences, and it goes bananas, Scott. There was a time I was worried about the drought in California when I lived there, and I never, ever, ever, ever watched TV. But for some reason, I wanted to watch the news that night. And I turned on, in the morning, I had said, I just want to hear from someone who knows why we've had this 500-year horrible, it was the worst drought in 500 years. I turned on the TV and there was my face. The news had interviewed me months before, and that night decided to run an interview with me. And the anchor woman, they played the little thing about why I'd moved to the area, Central California. And then the anchor woman said, we're going to look at the weather now. And Dave, Martha said she's really worried about the drought. It's like seeing someone die of thirst in front of her. And then they go to Dave, and Dave looks out of the wall at me and says, well, I probably shouldn't be giving advice to a life coach, but Martha, stop worrying about the drought.
Wow.
I had never watched TV there before. I kid you not. So are these things coincidental? Boy, not just that thing, that was like daily things like that happen to me. They probably happen a lot to you too, do they?
Oh yeah. I see the number, the sequential numbers, like what angel numbers. I see them probably 5 times a day. Every day. Every day. It's just like, and it's become a little joke with myself. And the main wisdom tradition that I've been studying has an interesting take on this, which is that, so where there's the interpretation of what we perceive, which is like a lot of the conditioning and the patterns and the ways, just like our learned emotional responses and things. But the director of attention is always the true self. And so what amongst you decide to focus on amongst everything you're seeing, that naked awareness and where it goes is the true self. And so that's been interesting for me to just play around with and try on for size, which is like, well, why did I turn my head in that exact moment to see 111? Like what's going on there? Like, is the screen that I'm seeing like created by my consciousness, or is there something directing my attention in a way so that there's meaning and synchronicity in that screen. And
Probably both.
Maybe, like who really knows? But like, it's just fun it's just like life's just way more fun to just not see it as a soup of randomness, you know?
Exactly. And what our culture does, you talk about the true self-directing attention. That's after you've let go of many, many layers of a cultured self, like socialized self. The Lamborghini is our culture's idea of happiness. You and I both know, having met many people who own Lamborghinis and are totally miserable, that's just an error. But it's an error that only the wealthy can make. So all the people who are who don't have much money, who don't have good health, who don't have a place in society, whatever it is, our culture says, well, obviously you have psychological suffering. You haven't measured up. And the fact is that you can climb and climb and climb up to the high top of the pyramid in our culture and still be incredibly miserable. And the more you're fixated on that, the less the magic will work for you. It's only when you take your focus off all the things your culture told you that you needed to possess and put it purely on, do I feel aligned, that you start to feel yourself. It's almost like your consciousness meets you inside and goes, hooray, we're together again. Let's go have some fun. And then it really is. It's at a time when so many people are suffering in so many ways. I'm constantly amazed by the fact that I can be horrified by the headlines, overwhelmed with sorrow and empathy for so many people, and then just so fundamentally joyful. Like it just bubbles back up like a beach ball that you try to hold underwater. And it has nothing to do with possessions, and it has nothing to do with knowledge or power or anything. It's just presence. It's all the things they say, but it's exquisite when you're in it.
Yeah. You know, before we hopped on here, you talked about this kind of like the essence of the awakened mind. And I'd love for you to share how you think about that, and then how people can think about moving towards that.
Yeah. So I wrote a book called The Way of Integrity when I came to believe that integrity is the one thing you need to wake up. If you your whole system is designed to awaken into not a higher state, a more joyful, a more relaxed, an easier state of consciousness, also vaster and more mysterious when you're in integrity. And a bunch of people read the book and came to me and said, I'm in integrity, but I'm scared all the time. I mean, look around us. This is terrifying. It's in integrity to be afraid. And I have to say that was a surprise to me, because one of the ways that I found was really effective, one of the practices I found really helpful was meditation, inward, watching your mind work, and then just not being connected, not being attached to it. And so when I sit in meditation and fear comes up, I watch it. And I see that it is based on stories, mostly about things that have never happened and never will, always on things that aren't right there in me while I'm sitting there in the room. And so they aren't real. And I can look at them the way they say the Buddha looked at his demons. And I just say, you are not the truth. You are illusion. And for the Buddha, they said they became flowers and fell all around him and on top of him. So I thought, well, you can't be in integrity and be afraid because it's not the truth. But then so many people were so scared that I looked at it, and I saw, as a sociologist and an obsessive psychologist, that both the human brain and the culture we're in right now, they're focused on material well-being. But the effect is that we live in the most frightened culture ever in the history of the world. It goes back 5,000 years, but we go, I think for 100,000 years before that, people weren't as frightened, because when you make yourself only, as Yeats said, a being that is sick with desire and fastened to a dying animal, is the way he described his material self, the world is terrifying. So I had to write a whole book about fear called Beyond Anxiety, about how to get clarity so that anxiety does not rule you, even in a society that is designed to maximize anxiety. I really believe that that is the way the culture is designed because they think it's motivating. It motivates you to not be present, to always be thinking and worrying and capitulating to the terror of punishment or lack. And that's not the truth. It really isn't. So I came to think that the awakened mind is simply a functioning human brain that has completely gone past fear and anxiety. And if you can do that, it just opens for you like a flower. And now I'm writing a book about what will happen if a whole bunch of people do that, because I think we will.
I hope we will. I hope we will too.
Well, you have.
Well, I'm working, I'm a work in progress over here. But yeah, I mean, I think similar to you, the interesting thing that I observed is that, the patterns of fear and doubt and anxiety, it's just a layer on top of an essence that is innately trusting.
Interesting.
And innately okay. And so, for me, it just became really obvious at one point that the more intelligent strategy than trying to control things is to actually just work directly on that.
Yeah.
And because then you can actually live unconditionally. And that's much, it's honestly just a much more intelligent strategy. Like, that's the funny thing about our hyper intellect culture is that like a lot of the ways that we go about trying to achieve happiness and well-being are just very roundabout and very variable.
Oh, ridiculous. And sometimes directly contradictory. I was so stunned when I realized that Jeff Bezos, not only in his corporate reports, but in speeches and in person, I've heard from people who've been in meetings with him, he loves to say every Amazon employee has to wake up terrified and then stay terrified all day, because that's how you get productivity. And the thing that boggles my mind, it's not that, okay, look at the logic. Thousands of people who are barely making ends meet, who are working as Amazon delivery people or whatever, all of them are supposed to literally live in fear, not so that they will be wealthy, but that so that one of the most wealthy people in the world will be even wealthier. And that's not even the weird part. The weird part is that people hear that and they go, well, that sounds like good sense. Like, what? What? Like, really? What if you decided that you should wake up trusting, as you just said, that you should wake up the way my son still does, absolutely trusting that his life is cared for and he'll be all right. And I mean, trusting it so deeply that he's been an anchor for many, many people his whole life, because his energy is without fear. And I think it's helped like put me on that wavelength since he was conceived. Now I think I can hold it on my own. But one thing I do know for sure is that everyone is this fearless, joyful, wild with love being. And some of us are excited about waking up, and a lot of us are on the brink. I really do think that.
I was going to ask you, you asked me about like, what are your thoughts on this shift in consciousness and how it's unfolding and what might happen? What are yours?
I think I've been watching this so hard, Scott, my whole life. We're in it. I do think people are now stepping across. I started to think, okay, I was studying Asian versions of enlightenment, doing a lot of meditation, getting closer. And then one day you wake up with no fear inside you at all. And everything around you is all magical. It's magic that the weatherman talks to me, but this pen is every bit as astonishing to me. It's like, oh, look at that. It's never existed before. My consciousness is bringing it into this, that the universe is a huge blank canvas labeled now. And consciousness is just projecting everything onto it, moment by moment by moment. And the reason I did that was that I sit in meditation and go, oh, like all the time, oh, look, it did it again. It did it again. And when there's not even a chain around your ankle anymore, I mean, I still get pulled back, but I know a lot of people further along than me. And it's real. And the magical occurrences are ongoing and they don't matter. I think what's meant to happen is just spitballing. I think that if between 15 and 30% of the world population is so distressed by the crises that are continuing to befall us, if they can be in the presence of those who have gone a little further down the path, there's a huge hunger born of fatigue and exhaustion with all the fear and the injustice and the breakdowns. And then if you see another alternative and you can just breathe that in, people can wake up very quickly, especially since I think we're all melded consciousness. And there are sociological precedents for this. And if you get between 25 and 30% of the population acting in a certain way, it ceases to fuel its opposite. So it's not that there's going to be a revolution and awakened people will take over. It's that they're going to throw a war and not a whole lot of people are going to come. Or maybe some will, but there will be enough people going, no, we're not doing that. And it takes the fuel out of the fury of our culture. And I think what we're seeing now it's in psychology, they call it an extinction burst, when like an animal can get a pellet by doing certain things, like pecking a lever, and then you stop the supply. It will peck and peck and peck like a crazy thing for like 2 days, and then it'll give up. And I think right now, people who have the madness of our culture just wrapped into their brains, and it's worked for them before, but they're not happy. They're not satisfied. And so they keep grasping and needing and climbing and needing more power and more money. And eventually it breaks. It has to break. It gives up. And in the quiet after an extinction burst, there's a space to find who we really are. And I think we're in the extinction burst right now of the old consciousness. That's what I think.
Do you have any perspective on how long you think this might last?
Based on what we see sociologically, the interesting thing is that what's happening now has happened before in various societies, but it's happening so much more rapidly and at a larger scale now. And I would give it about 2 years until there are enough people who have chosen to walk away from the culture into their own truth for much of the fuel to go out of the old culture and a new way of being to begin, especially since, we're running out of planet here.
There is that too.
It's kind of, but one of the things that happens when you're awake, I've had moments, for an absolute certainty you are not separate from anything and that everything is conscious. And so you cannot do anything to the earth or to another person without experiencing that in your own being. So if you bless another or the earth, you feel blessed. And if you harm another or the earth, you feel harmed. And again, suffering is our ally. It's meant to steer us toward who we really are, to help us become what we have been all along. And then we're going to have such a party.
I look forward to that. The other thing that I noticed too is that, when you the feedback that reality gives you when you're out of alignment or you do something that's out of integrity, when the deeper you go on the path, it's so quick and it's so fast that it's like, you just can't do it anymore. It's like, you just can't be mean to people, or you can't, make certain decisions. And I've just life just works its magic to just say, hey, this is what's going to happen if you keep acting like this. And it gets faster and faster and faster.
Yeah. It reminds me of skiing. If you're snow skiing, if you're on the bunny hill learning to ski and you fall down, you're okay. But if you are skiing a black diamond slope and you're going really fast and you get out of alignment like you catch an edge or something. You don't even have to ski to know what this phrase sort of connotes. You have a crash so bad they call it a yard sale.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that means all your equipment has flown off and is scattered on the snow around you. And you're sliding down toward at 40 miles an hour down the hill. And if you are, for all of us who are like running as fast as we can toward the new consciousness, just know that when you get out of alignment, and you will, expect a yard sale level crash, not a bunny hill crash. Oh, it's quite educational.
Oh, yeah. There was one other question related to alignment that I wanted to ask you, which is, and I've experienced this myself at times and sometimes still do, is sometimes there's this feeling where it's like, hey, I know what I'm supposed to be doing and I'm doing it. Yeah, for whatever reason, like life still feels kind of hard. And like the fruit isn't ready to harvest yet. And what advice do you have for people that feel like they're in integrity, but things just don't seem to be clicking for them yet?
Examine very, very closely your beliefs about time. Because time, I mean, if you look at the physics of it, nobody understands why it only seems to run in one direction. And we do know that it is highly malleable. And that's what Einstein said. He's like, it actually does stretch and collapse. And I've read more and more interesting things, like one master violinist, and then another book I was reading about holding change in a politically active situation, where people who are masters of this say that without any ceremony at all, they say you'll have to bend time, or you'll have to extend time, or you'll have to collapse the time. I'm like, what? This violinist said she learned that when you're doing a run that is actually too fast for the brain to send messages to the fingers and back, her music teacher told her you have to stretch time so that you have time to do this. Time is something that our culture believes in absolutely. And because of that, a lot of us think we are in the wrong place in time. It hasn't come yet. It's not happening fast enough. Oh my God, I'm too late. I'm too old. That is one of the sources of pain that collapses as you get older and older. And I've gotten a lot older and older. And I've watched the things that I knew had to happen come around in time. And I realized that if I had this is something my son does really well, and he talks about it. If I had just reached through time to the place where I knew I was supposed to end up, and felt that it had already happened from a perspective that is outside of time, I would have been as satisfied through the whole run-up as I was after I received what I was asking for. Does that make sense? I used to order things online and then they wouldn't show up because I didn't believe they would. I just thought that can't possibly work for me. I don't deserve it. I'm not a good enough person. And I would order stuff and it would go to like other people's houses and stuff. And I had to work on my self-concept to get to the point where I could receive a package. Now I order something online. I know it's coming. I'm delighted from that moment. I also believe that in 2 years, we'll see whether I'm right or wrong. But I can feel what will happen when 30% of the population steps into this new way of being. And it is so aligned with all my meaning-making systems that I live in a kind of rapturous state of delight that it's already here. And I feel that way about death too. I know I'm going home, so I can be completely relaxed and stretch out the time I'm alive if it's necessary. Become a real mystic by questioning time, and you will be able to walk on multiple timelines at the same apparent moment. And because of that, your suffering will be profoundly less and your joy will be infinitely multiplied.
My body is buzzing right now.
Oh, cool. I was thinking that one was too weird.
No, I mean, it doesn't feel weird at all to me.
Cool.
And yeah, I mean, I think I definitely think it's like the interesting thing about it is it seems like physics, at least some people have acknowledged that time is not actually real. And we know it's an invented human concept, but like even like the conceptual, the way we conceive of time is not actually real. But I think where there's less clear application for a lot of people that even hear that idea is like, so what do I do with that? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like how do I apply that to step beyond the concept? And I think this is a really, really practical cool tip that you shared.
Oh, let me give a practical one then that is, I mean, how to bend time, I don't really know. I believe it happens, but it's one of those things that you learn with your right hemisphere instead of your left. So it's difficult to put into practice. But you can experience touching the new consciousness anytime you want by getting still enough and being in presence wherever you are. I did this little visualization online once, and then people started asking me to do it again and again and again. If you don't mind, I could offer that as a little, 1 minute practicum.
Let's do it.
Okay. So back to physics for just a second. Even if you take an atom that is matter, not wave energy, if you blew it up to the size of a football field, it would be about the size, the actual matter would be about the size of a baseball. Yep. The rest is empty space. So empty space is something that our culture discounts, but actually I see it as being alive and full of love and full of joy. So there are 3 things that I call on when I need to reorient myself. And the first one is space. So the way I do that is I, straighten my spine, breathe deeply, and I imagine the atoms inside my body, and I see them as these like football field stadiums with these tiny specks of matter. And I take my focus off the matter and I become conscious of the space. So I imagine the space inside the atoms of my body. And in that space is an absolute stillness in which all motion occurs, all physical motion, all emotion itself, which is motion. There's a stillness holding it, like a framework, a matrix that is so alive and so in love with us. So then I go to stillness. And the last one is silence. And you can hear, even if you're listening to my voice right now, if you shift your attention to the silence in which the voice comes, you'll know that the voice must stop, but the silence will never, ever desert you. And it too is in love with you, adores you, adores you. So imagine the space, the silence, and the stillness inside your own body and let it fall in love with you and let yourself believe that you can fall in love with it. Boom. That's a quick way home.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Martha.
Thank you, Scott.
Well, I think that's a strong note to finish on. This has been an absolutely wonderful conversation. I so enjoyed, just experiencing your wisdom and talking about some of these fun topics that I think we both like to geek out on. And
I'm into it.
I imagine there's people that want to explore more. And I know you've created so many wonderful things and have different programs. So I want to give you the opportunity to share where the best place people can go to find all that.
Thank you. Yeah, there's my website, MarthaBeck.com, which I don't even know what it looks like. Nice people help me with it. I do 2 podcasts, The Gathering Room and then another one called Bewildered. They're both free. And then I have a community online that is, it costs some money to run, so it's a low cost item, but it's just a way of being in community with other people who are on this path. And that's called wildercommunity.com. I think that's it. And then books and stuff.
Nice. We'll link all those out. And cool that you do podcasts too. I didn't know that. I'm going to check it out.
Well, you're the master, Scott. I'm just learning. But hey, it's all just a joyride, right?
That's right. That's right. It's one to enjoy. Cool. Well, thanks, Martha. It's so great to have you on.
Oh, it's been wonderful talking to you. I have a wonderful time in Costa Rica, one of my favorite places. And Give yourself a big old hug from me, would you?
Absolutely.